What's going on, guys? This is Ryan with Dark Outpost, and we know that The Last of Us Part 2 was designed with an agenda in mind and was made to appeal to a certain group of people. Well, it turns out that even the type of people that Naughty Dog and Neil Druckmann are pandering to hate this game and are outraged over how they have decided to try to portray these characters. So we are going to get into it. There will be spoilers for The Last of Us Part 2 if for some reason you still want to play this game. I don't want to spoil it for you, so I would not watch the rest of this video. Let's take a look at this article. When I saw this, I just had to laugh. I just had to laugh. Last of Us Part 2 dead naming prompts outcry from LGBTQ plus community and allies. And when we heard about all of the storyline and all of the leaks, we knew that this game did have an agenda. Now, there are much bigger problems to this game than just the extremely progressive agenda that is involved, because let's face it, in the entertainment industry, there are a ton of agendas injected into nearly everything we consume. But when it starts to be all about the agenda as opposed to the story, that is when it becomes a problem. And we saw things with the story that were just not forgivable. We knew that with the leaks. We tried to warn people, and guess what? The game's here, and so many people hate it for the story, for the agenda, and for everything in between. And the idea that the group of people that you made this game specifically to pander to hate it should say something. You completely missed the mark. And by focusing on these things instead of the story, that is always a mistake. Let's take a look. The Last of Us Part 2 is a controversial game, and much of that controversy has been fueled by bigotry towards, right out of the bat, by bigotry towards developer Naughty Dog's foregrounding of LGBTQ and gender non-conforming characters. However, the game's decision to dead name a transgender character, Lev, played by trans actor Ian Alexander, and we're going to talk about Ian Alexander, has also prompted condemnation from members and allies of the LGBTQ plus community. So on one hand, anyone that doesn't like anything about the agenda shoved in here is a bigot. You're just a bigot if you don't like some portions of this game. Yet then, over on the other side, LGBTQ plus allies, whatever, they also have a problem with this game. In a game already dealing with fabricated controversy from the far right corners of the gaming community. Yes, far right corners. People have an issue with Joel being killed in the first 2 hours, even though Naughty Dog faked trailers to make us think that he would be a bigger part of the game than he was. Yeah, that makes you far right if you have a problem with that. And relative silence on why developers chose to portray these issues in this manner. The Last of Us Part 2's actually legitimate dead naming controversy, yes, that is actually a legitimate controversy, nothing else, got it, reveals that even progressive developers have a long way to go. You can never do enough. It is never enough. The far left progressive SJW outrage mob will always have a problem with whatever you decide to do. What is dead naming? GLAAD director of transgender representation Nick Adams has defined dead naming as to reveal a transgender person's birth name without their explicit permission. This practice is harmful because it constitutes an invasion of privacy that only serves to undermine the trans person's true authentic identity and can put them at risk for discrimination, even violence. How does dead naming come up in The Last of Us 2? Lev, who, let's be fair, I have been talking, when all of this stuff came out, people were talking about Abby being trans. I said, guys, there's no proof that Abby is trans. She just looks extremely manly and extremely desexualized. But Lev, the character played by Ian Alexander, a trans actor, is almost definitely trans. And that turns out that I was right all along. And since we did just bring up Ian Alexander, I do just want to point out some of his tweets in his history. And that's not to say that people can't change or anything like that, but Ian Alexander doesn't seem like a cool dude. No disrespect to my exes, but I'm not dating white people anymore. Stop gassing up white boys with no talent. Y'all really love to hype up the most plain-looking white boys. That's the type of voice actor that Naughty Dog is looking for, and in fact, he didn't even have to audition or anything like that. Neil Druckmann singled him out and wanted this child trans actor to play this character.
What was the audition experience like? Did you know, going into it, who you were playing exactly?
Actually, Neil reached out to the director of the show that I was on, the OA, and that's how I got the role. I did a couple of
It's a great show.
like self-tapes and auditions and stuff, but I pretty much went into it knowing who I was going to play, so.
Back to this. Lev is an adolescent who befriends Abby during her treacherous adventure in Seattle. Lev has been kicked out of his religious community known as Seraphites for shaving his head and identifying as male. The game drops some pretty clear contextual hints about his identity, but during a confrontation with some Seraphites, they angrily refer to Lev by their dead name. Lev asks if Abby heard what the Seraphites called him, and she confirms that she did. Abby doesn't press the issue, only saying he can tell her more if he feels like Lev declines. And I believe the dead name is Lily, if I recall. How players have responded. I'm not going to pay $60 for a game that mistreats dead names and abuses trans characters, translator contributor Kazuma Hashimoto said on Twitter. It doesn't matter how dark, grim a setting that is, that's unnecessary. Developers need to understand what kind of player will feel good about that kind of violence directed to trans people. Well, this game directs violence at literally everyone. Joel being maybe foremost in people's mind about who the violence is directed to. Ellie gets the absolute crap kicked out of her for a lot of the game. She's a lesbian. Is that a problem? Can we not kick the crap out of lesbians? It only has to be straight white men. Those are the only ones we can have violence towards. Is that it? Is that what's going on? You can't have violence towards a character. If you put a trans character in your video game, you can't be violent to them? Is that really where we're at in 2020? Where people want trans inclusion, but they don't want anything bad to happen to them? Is that really what we're talking about? This is insane. And this is why you can never appease the people who just are looking for diversity and representation, because it's never enough. While The Last of Us Part 2 likely aims to shed light at the difficulties of being transgender, it does so clumsily. Hashimoto points out that some gamers might even get pleasure from seeing transgender characters beat up or dead named, and there is a gif going on there about Fat Geralt hitting Lev in the face, and then he smacks into the bottom side of a garage door that is going around. So they're true. There are characters getting pleasure. There's also characters getting pleasure from throwing Abby off a cliff or killing her in any way you can because they hate that character. Even if the game portrays actions like deadnaming in a negative fashion, should it really be portraying them at all? Oh my god. The game clearly explains that Seraphites expelled Lev for defying the group's traditional gender role, so deadnaming the character comes across as an unnecessary, saying it louder for the people in back moment. It's hard for the game to present itself progressive while pandering to ignorance. Jesus. And here it really is. It is, for example, extremely distressing for cisgender writers to have a trans character where we have to go through multiple levels in a meandering subplot where that character is repeatedly dead-named and is revealed that he was meant to become the wife to an elder. Fellow cis writers, do not dead-name your trans characters. Just don't do it. We don't need to. So the entire point of this game is abuse, right? Like that abuse and violence and revenge, and you're complaining that someone is being abused in some way because it's a trans character. You can't do anything wrong to them. You can't have anything bad happen to them ever. Thank you. Critics suggest cis white male writers like Neil Druckmann are out of their wheelhouse on this issue and disappointingly rely on queer identity as a mere setup for abuse. This widespread sentiment is apparent through just a simple Twitter search. Dead-naming characters and dramatizing their abuse isn't representation, it's bad writing. But it's important to note that much, if not all, criticism here is directed at the writers. Alexander's portrayal of Lev has drawn warm praise online. I'm sure it has, because anyone that said anything different would immediately be canceled by a mob of woke Twitter users. So yeah, I'm sure it has all been absolutely glowing of Alexander's portrayal of Lev. Inverse analysis. The Last of Us Part 2 makes some significant strides in terms of LGBTQ plus representation in games, but its shortcomings also shows that the industry has a long way to go. While the handle of Lev may have been well intended by Naughty Dog writers, many players find it offensive, objectionable, and just plain unnecessary. I agree, the entire inclusion of that character is unnecessary. Games don't need to resort to dead name in order to say they're representing the transgender experience. Yes, so thank you. Put more diversity in there. Put more trans characters. Put more lesbians in there. But make sure you're nice to all of them. That none of them can have anything bad happen to them. Listen, Abby is called a homophobic slur during this game. Is that a problem to anyone? Is anyone sitting there bitching? You know what? I bet there is. If I look hard enough like Inverse, I bet there is people complaining. How dare you use a homophobic slur even to show that someone is a bigot, and then they continue to bring up how bigoted that person is. This game panders to this group of people, to the LGBTQ plus allies community. Yet even they have an issue with it, because when you decide to play this game, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Neil Druckmann, Naughty Dog, that's exactly what's happening. Even the hardcore group of people that you decided to pander to, it's not enough for them. That's why you need to focus on the story instead of this artificial injection of diversity and representation. People don't have a problem with diverse characters. What they have a problem with is when that's all that matters, when that's the only thing that matters instead of the story. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Make sure you smash a like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, share this video out there, and I will talk to you later. Thanks for watching, everyone, and a huge shout out to my patrons. I appreciate you guys so much. Want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram? Check out the description below. You'll find links to my P.O. box and my Patreon as well. And I'll talk to you guys later.